really glad to have Minister Candace Simpson here with us to talk about Juneteenth and just in the period of time that we're in right now. Because one of the realities is this, things are really getting tough out here. And a lot of people are wondering, as we are rounding the corner to things like elections and all these other things that are happening with LGBTQ rights, particularly trans rights, being under the gun and taken away. A lot of these liberties and things that people took for granted are being stripped away. And even a lot of our democratic processes that people say, hey, go and vote for, make sure you vote for the right people. Well, when people, even after January 6th, unfortunately, it's like we voted for them. These people were voted for, or like let's say in Atlanta, these folks were voted for, and they voted something that the vast majority of people did not want, black or white. And then, or in Tennessee, expelling, you know, elected officials for something that maybe a tap on the wrist if you want to really be petty, or even I forgot what state it is, but the trans representative, um, you know, getting banned, getting barred, expelled from the House, and legally elected. But just, I guess, just what are some things that you think that people need to understand in this moment, and even what are you feeling in this moment as Juneteenth is here to celebrate, liberation and the hearing of freedom for Black people.
Hmm. What am I feeling? I am feeling a lot of rage that I don't know what to do with, because sadly, the rage only it's only impacting me at this point.
Mhm.
And I'm at the place where I'm like, I want it to be everybody's problem. It's like that meme from, I think it's Bad Girls Club. I didn't get no sleep because of y'all. Y'all not gonna get no sleep because of me. Um, that's how I'm feeling. And um, I'm glad that you mentioned all of the developments, particularly in Atlanta right now with Cop City, because I think it's one of the most clear examples of all of these forces coming together to conspire against particularly Black people. So, of course, it is the decimation of the forest, which is in a predominantly Black neighborhood. And then it is the training for fascist responses. It is the conspiring of various corporate entities who will themselves win if this continues, and it is continuing to be advanced. um, and all of the international implications for what this means, particularly as it relates to war and corporate investment in the war machine. And so the feeling that I have had this week, I was watching some of the um, public comments in the hearing, and I was so impressed and also so deeply hurt because um, people packed that space in a pandemic. Like, we are still actively in a pandemic. They packed that space, and of course, people organized to um, distribute masks and put a filter near the microphone and things of that nature. But and that's not saying like majority as in 51%, it's saying most as in closer to 90 plus percent, 95 plus percent of people in Georgia do not want this thing to be built. And I'm feeling really angry because I don't feel like any of the mechanisms available to me are actually useful. So, okay, we've done the thing where we've called our local officials, we've voted, we've protested, you know, there are things that are available to me and safe to me, because that's also an element that we've been investing in, and it's not doing anything. And it's very disheartening because I don't want to lie to the people that I love and say that we should invest further into this process. So, yeah, that's a good question of how am I feeling? I'm feeling rage, I'm feeling helpless, and I'm feeling the pressure to um somehow through some kind of alchemy turn that rage and helplessness into hope. I don't have that. I have the hope that sustains me. I have the hope that enables me to get out of bed and do the things that I choose to do on that day. But I want more room to say this cannot be fixed. And because it cannot be fixed, I will not position myself as someone who will fix it alone. So, just thinking about ways that I do want to respond to this moment, not just with Cop City, but in service of what is happening in Atlanta and across the nation. I want to do more things like this offline, talking to my buddies and um, doing the things that feel delightful.
Hmm. Now, I am going to push you gently because and push you in terms of I know what may probably a good amount of people who'd be hearing this would think that well you have to have hope, right? And we can't just give up, we can't just do nothing. And so things are hard, but we just have to make sure that we get more people out to the polls and elect the right people. And we can't just give up. If we give up then they win. And you know that's how a lot of people respond when they hear things like that. But just how do you what would you say to that? What would you say to people who have that response, who would hear that and say, well, if that's how we approach it then we're going to lose?
I mean, when it's funny when you started saying that, you a song came to my mind because, well, and not just any song, a hymn, because I am that Baptist who has basically the whole red hymnal in my heart. But I'm thinking about the hymn, or the song that we sing, "Hold to God's Hand, God's Unchanging Hand." And there's a part where the lyrics are, "Build your hopes on things eternal." And of course, whoever wrote that song, whenever they wrote it, likely imagined that the things eternal are the church and, a very limited imagination of God, a very limited imagination of the Holy Spirit and of Jesus and of Christ and of, our faith. But for me, it may include some of those things, but the eternal things that I'm building my hopes on are in things that change. Like things are not eternal because they are static or because they've been here a long time. They're eternal because they have a dynamic of responding to the hour and yet continue. Like, so, I'm thinking about things that feel eternal to me is love and delight and um, family in all of its definitions, um, the most expansive imagination of family. There are things that will always be important to me, and those are the things that I want to value. I do not build my hopes on the Democratic Party or on the electoral process or on the United States of America because these are not eternal things. These are man made, and I'm using the word man on purpose.
Literally.
Man-made structures that are designed to benefit a very, very, very small percentage of humans on this planet. Um, and humans don't even make up most of the planet. Like, to have a human centered worldview is to really take for granted just how outnumbered we are by insects.
Oh yeah, like there's far like I'm being really nerdy, but in far in terms of biomass, ants outweigh us by a magnitude, you know.
Yes.
And so it's very. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense, but it's just that the idea that I mean, we often think we are the center of our own worlds, but we also think we are the center of the world, and there's not even a center to the universe. So we're looking for something that's not even really there. There is no center. But I wonder, I'm just thinking about this still in with Juneteenth about how even, this doesn't sound celebratory, but they had to be told that they were free, that they were no longer slaves. And that was the reality of the powers that be having to sort their stuff out, through a war. So it wasn't like it was just paperwork and things like that. But it's just still that, you know, I think it's really, really important for people in terms of Juneteenth to realize that um, the people who have power need to change. Um, it's not as simple as changing people's minds, although that's nice. But that I think Juneteenth is a perfect demonstration of that. As much as which again, people still think that people were just, oh, I'm a slave, it's fine, no problem. You know, that even with the resistance that we know was rampant in the minute and major ways all throughout enslavement here in the United States, that ultimately it was something that happened between, just to be blunt, white folks that ultimately changed the status quo. And it's something that I think too is more important in this moment is that it's that, things are getting worse. Um, and the things that this idea of decency and civility, that somehow is more important than maintaining human life. And now this isn't me talking, not the UUSC. It's like, oh, RBJ. Oh, I had lunch with Anthony Scalia. He's a great guy, and I'm just kind of like, I don't. I know she did a couple of things that were wonderful, but wonderful to whomst? Be say it that way. But it's just that it's bad out here. It's really bad, and I think that so many people think that progress is one inevitable and two enduring. And I think those are the things that are a problem. But I think that's the result when, if you pin your hope simply on, well, let's get the right people, into this situation, that situation, that office, this office, that office, which has its place, to be clear. Um, but again, what happens if January 6th succeeds? Everybody voted. What happens if that succeeds? And they got pretty far, all things considered. Who's to stop them from doing it again? Or if they can't do it on a national level, I mean, but I think that's the other thing too is that has happened so often in so many towns with black populations so many times before. It's like January 6th just happened on a national scale, but that's happened a lot in so many people. But it's like the idea of liberation of Juneteenth. I guess let's veer towards some more conversation about even that. What place do non-black people, particularly white people, have in engaging with the idea of Juneteenth? Like, what are some ways that you would recommend that they approach it differently than they have been so far?
Well, it's funny because I grew up in New York, in Brooklyn, and I learned about Juneteenth in my elementary school, which was a Black church school. All of my teachers were Black. And I remember learning about it like in the history sense, but I don't as much remember celebrations. It wasn't part of the culture at that time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I grew up north too. I never even heard of
Yeah,
Juneteenth till I moved to
yeah,
DC over a decade.
and now there are Juneteenth functions. There have always been Juneteenth functions where I'm from, but in the last like 5 years, and maybe we can even be more precise and say that it was summer 2020 and all of the national uprisings that sparked this interest in Juneteenth. And I think I want
Hmm.
to start there because um, I am very afraid of Juneteenth becoming like Black 4th of July in folks' and
Mhm.
I when I think of like the impetus to market things and to brand things and to sell things, and now Target has a display, and there's all these calls to support Black businesses, which we should be doing regardless. It's obviously not the only thing that we can be doing to have integrity, but I think it's important to start with the fact that there is a recent energy of celebrating Juneteenth that is reactionary, and it is in a
Mhm.
response to the large scale uprisings. To be fair, like there have always been Black folks who've been trying to get Juneteenth recognized as a national holiday, and I don't want to erase that as like a necessary um like detail, but I think it's important to start there because in the United States, the way that we celebrate holidays is through consumption and through
Mhm.
capitalism. And I think now that it is a federal holiday, all of us have to be mindful of that instinct and cautious with the with the ghosts that are among us and with the spirits that are watching and are very much present. So there's that. But I think in terms of what white folk and Juneteenth, I maybe this is not a helpful answer, but like I truly don't care. And I'm not saying that to be flippant. I'm saying that as like um, maybe a better way is to like describe this in a story. So I remember December 2014. This was like in the height of many shut it down protests, and that was in response to the killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson and Eric Garner in Staten Island. And there was this panel that I was at, and this pastor stood up to ask, well, I took a trip to Ferguson, and they told us that the voting record for the residents was very, very low compared to other places. And so, wouldn't it just be
Mhm.
better? I mean, what if they just voted? And I've heard that argument in so many other ways before then and since. But there was something so cruel about the posture that you have figured it all out. We just need to vote.
Mm.
um, and that was really hurtful.
Mhm. Without ever interrogating, like, which I think is something I think both of us have hinted around it, but I think that is one thing that I would put on the list is that actually understand the systems. It's like the idea that black people weren't protesting their own enslavement is, clearly foolish to assume that, and that ultimately, you know, the white people who have power, white people and the folks who collaborate with the idea of white supremacy in all of its forms need to stop and realize the structural realities. That doesn't matter how much things that they could do. And even with that, it's like when you have a lot of people who were processed through the criminal justice system for whatever reason, who have their vote eliminated, disenfranchised, you know, or even if it's not that, just hey, you working a job, it's hourly, you don't have a day to just go stand in line forever, things like that. It's very much not recognizing the reality, and it's like, well, if voting is that important, why not make it easy? It's like you're saying, just like
Yeah.
that posture. So I think for me,
Yeah,
I'm
of
putting that
course.
on the
I
list.
think it is
It's
posture because it's not easy to vote. Is I mean, when I moved, so for context, to all of our listeners, I moved from Brooklyn to Chicagoland, and the process of there's the practical stuff, like the logistics of changing my voter registration. But then there's also like, well, who should I vote for? What is a district? What is I mean, just learning a completely different system. Um, and there is very little, what we call voter education is actually candidate, Q&A. Like, voter engagement is, in my estimation, closer to political education, giving us an opportunity and creating opportunities to reflect on political issues that are things we can vote on, because there are ballot initiatives, there are proposals, there are things on the ballot. Um, but we don't do that. We just invite the candidates to, a happy hour location, and we ask them what they're going to do about the roads and the schools and, prayer in school. Like, we ask them these things. And it's really impossible to develop a consciousness in that sense. And I think that's what, I was thinking of earlier with this panel where the pastor said, why didn't they just vote? And it turned out at that panel that there was someone in the room who was from Ferguson. And he spoke about how difficult it is. And this is 2014. So this is before so much of the recent energy towards, I don't know why I say increased fascism as if it's something that you can have more or less of. But yeah. Yeah. But he testified about voter intimidation at the polls and like surveillance and, you know, all of the things that make voting dangerous. And if we take seriously like the history of this country, you know, there are still descendants of folk who are really unhappy about the way the Civil War like ended up, and they're still stuck there, and it enrages them to no end to know um that we are voting. Um and that is from someone who at this point, I mean, I am so disgusted in the electoral process that I would like a different conversation around political engagement, um because everyone is lying to me. So I'm so I guess my thought is, the question is what white folks in Juneteenth. I am hoping for a more robust um, critique of the democratic process, and that we would take seriously folks. What you may read as apathy is and can be a principled stance against participating in a clearly corrupt system. And I know even, all kinds of folks have issues with that stance. It's not just, a white wasp posture. Our folks have,
Mhm.
right.
We
There's,
died for the vote. And you know how I generally don't like that framing. It's like, no, they exercised their civil right and were killed for it. I'm pretty sure they wanted to go home. And I'm pretty sure the hope was to go home. And it's not like they didn't willingly they didn't drag their cross to Golgotha to pull the leather, the lever. But it's like, no, they were murdered for attempting to exercise the rights they were told they had, which I think is an important framing because it's not so much about us. It's like this is what was done to us, and that I mean, if it was that's the case, then like did the power run out because they're trying to take our vote now anyway? And found all those other ways to do it. So it's but no, I feel you. I mean, I think the thing that's hard to impress upon people, particularly when they themselves don't feel it and don't see it. And I think a better version of empathy is, and even I think sometimes empathy is often overrated. It's like, you don't have to feel what I'm saying is like, I'm telling you. So mentally, why do you need to feel that in order to do something with it? As if what I'm feeling doesn't matter, but but just like a structural critique, I think just the reality of that to really think about the structures and systems and how for the folks who really do want to make a difference, who really do want to make a change, how can they position themselves to actually do just that, even where they are? I think just how can they do that, and just realizing that okay, at some point people are going to have to put more skin in the game, and a lot of us don't really have much more skin left, just to be frank about it. But I guess if you were, because I know a lot of what you do in your work is education, and that is your main thing. And there's so many resources and things out there. And what should white people do, and what should people do who want to change it? And we go through that kind of every summer too, about okay, let's read this book, and here's a book list, and we read the book, and it's great. But there often I find is not that willingness, as we were saying, like just to structural realities. I think for me, the thing that's stark about Juneteenth is that you know the black people didn't free themselves, and not that they were not. I'm not saying it in like a if they didn't want to be slaves, it's their fault kind of way, but it's like it was the United States fighting and them killing each other for years to the point that got that happened. Now, I'm not suggesting that that happened now. Would not like to have to dodge, you know, no war, please. Appreciate it, but that it's something. But something had to happen amongst themselves to actually impact things because as much as black people have and always did resist their treatment, it wasn't until the powers that be changed somehow, some way, that the conditions changed because they are the ones who had the power and made the rules. And so, at least what I tell people now is, "How do you give up my power?" It's like, okay, don't be so quick to give up your power. Use it. You are in a room where I cannot go. And so, what I even for myself, what I've said is, people are going to invite me into rooms because of how I show up. And because of that, I'm going to make sure that I bring people with me who don't get the invite, which also led to me not getting invites anymore. Um, but it's like, hey, you are the one in the office. When you, even on a small level, if you're in a room and all of your colleagues are white and someone says something racist, you call them out on it. You say something. It's as simple as that, and simple. And I get that that is still a challenge in things, but to recognize that that's stuff that we go through every day. And it's not even that it's not even that it's not hard, and it will be hard, challenging for them, but that true allyship is actually, I shouldn't have to tell you, it shouldn't have to be anybody black in that room for you to do that, or if maybe, or find some other way to deal with that situation. Maybe you can't speak out right then and there, but maybe you report it. Maybe you do something. But I really would like people to kind of get that for this Juneteenth, that you all have to do something in your own households. You all have to do something now. Like, this is like, vote, go ahead and vote, read your book, do all your stuff. Fine. You know, you have to do something with your family, with your friends, your choir, your fraternity, your sorority, your kids' play group. It's really on you, particularly for the folks who espouse those, liberal ideas. It's like, it's your folks. I can get my Uncle Junebug together. I can get, my Aunt Brenda to chill out, but I can't do anything about, Uncle Frederick in your family. I can't do anything about Aunt Susan or Catherine, who is going to vote for, you know, for, I can't do anything about that. None of us can. Even if we all come out and vote, we would still lose. You know what I mean? Like, all of us come out and vote. We're not gonna outdo, like, we can't outdo 53% of white women. You know what I mean? We can't do those things with our current system. So I think that's just my one thing. Is like, before you get, I think that's the other thing too. Before you get to a critique about the person, because see, that's the other thing too. Is like, again, they get to be individuals, and we all are groups. And so it's like, before you venture to the individual choices of and it being the culmination of people's bad choices or neglect, look for the structure. Because, but then you'd have to interrogate your idea about black people in general, and assume that, oh wait, I think that black people are lazy, don't I? I actually think I congratulate people who don't seem lazy, because I think it's exceptional, not because I actually think that their actions are good. I'm more amazed by what I perceive to be their exceptionality than their actual talent. I mean, you and I know we've got that. You're so articulate. It's like, yeah, thanks. I can talk.
Yeah, it's a strange, it's a very dehumanizing dynamic, and I think for us to be such a military superpower, like for us to have so much investment in war and violence, we are also culturally, as a nation, a very conflict avoidant nation. And to me it's very strange because our national identity is one of power and strength and might, and we are omnipresent, command centers all over the globe. We are anywhere. We are more US military and Starbucks everywhere. Like, and but I also think, some of what you were describing about, you know, but no one wants to be the bad guy at Thanksgiving, you know, Thanksgiving, all of that. Um, and no one wants to offend, in at the workplace. And so we just live in a world between this tension of like this very brutal like investment in the military superpowers, which shows up in our local police forces. And yet somehow like you can't be challenged on an idea. Um, it's very absurd to watch. And I personally believe that conflict makes communities stronger. And I'm not saying that we have to experience the worst kind of conflict for the sake of becoming closer. But I am saying that I know that a relationship is, has some foundation to it when I can be called out and I can be told the truth. you know, I value when people can tell me, actually, that kind of hurt my feelings, because what it tells me is you value the relationship more than anything else. And it takes a lot of bravery and courage to express that you've been hurt or that you witnessed something that was, not ideal. And so I think that's kind of like the impetus behind all of these videos with what they call the Karens. And, because you're really watching that fragility and that kind of, I'm bold, I'm strong,
Hmm. And when that's
right.
countered and
Yeah.
challenged, the response that comes up, it's like, when you don't want real meaningful conflict, then you get lots of bombs and arms and things because you don't really want to engage. You want to obliterate. You like that's the thing. It's like you don't have to talk if I'm blowing you up. There, can't talk if you're in jail. There, which sucks. But yeah, I mean, I think we both are saying the same thing there. It's like I think the idea of for people who are seeing this who are not black, particularly for white folks, to understand that, like, to put themselves in the game, to think structurally, to think about okay, and also just to really think about what you view about black people, because ultimately that's what it comes down to. If you think that I mean, if you think that, but this is the hard part because people don't realize that it's like you must think that there is something about that general quality of our humanity. If you think that we're okay with people being hungry, with crime, with all these things going on, and crime in scare quotes, and without scare quotes, that we're okay with those types of things, that and it's like no, but you never ask questions of your own folks the way you ask of us, because white people don't vote either. It's just a lot more of y'all. You know what I mean? It happens all the time. It's just like, yeah, like y'all don't vote either. It's and the same rules that prevent a lot of black people from voting also prevent a lot of y'all from voting too. A lot of those things, and but it's that's just what I would hope. But I see that our time. I just want to say thank you for spending some time with us and sharing your thoughts about Juneteenth. And, if there's anything you want to shout out, anything that you want, any place you want people to come see uh, about what you're doing or what you're writing, anything you want to share?
Yes. Um, don't look for me. No, I'm just kidding. It's funny because, we've talked so much about like precarity and danger and safety and those things. And, lately I have been thinking about what it is to live a public life um, when you are targeted. So I say that kind of tongue in cheek, like don't come looking for me, but also yes.
Don't come looking for me. Yeah, don't come looking
But
for me.
I do have, there are parts of my thought process and my ministry that I do make available for the public on my website, which is called Fish Sandwich Heaven. And, folks can learn
Hmm.
more about where that title comes from on the website, but it's fishsandwicheaven.com. So they can peruse the things. Is that the word? Peruse? Peruse?
Peruse.
English is
Yeah.
hard, okay?
Mhm.
But they can browse. How about that? They can browse on that website.
Yeah, that sounds really good. We will make sure to let the people know that.
Thanks. Good to chat.
And thanks for your time. Really, really appreciate it.